Hey listeners, welcome back to Tales of Abundance. I'm Dr. John Oberg, and joining me as always is my co-host Randy Lorensen. Hey Randy.
Good morning, John.
This is it's an exciting one today.
Yeah, more so for you than me. We're going to rip the Band-Aid off and see where this leads. I don't know. I'm not sure that this is the most exciting episode for me because I'm not exactly sure what this is going to uncover.
Yeah, we do a lot of different types of episodes where we talk about abundance. But this one's a little bit different, not a lot different, but a little bit different. We had a conversation in an earlier podcast where we talked about buffalo running into a storm and to get through it faster versus cows who run away from the storm and then they stay wet longer because the storm follows them. But we talked about that and we were talking about some of the things in your career. Do you want to back us up to that last episode and tell us how we got to this particular topic today?
Yeah, big picture, when we were talking about my life, there were things that just, even when I went to college and I didn't know what I wanted to do, it wasn't so much running toward what I wanted to do. It was running away from. I knew I didn't want to be a farmer. I didn't want to be a logger. All the jobs that existed in the little small town where I grew up, none of those were interesting to me. So I was going away to college kind of to get away from that. Then I worked at Vector. I was there. I did very well. I was moving along. I was running a division, and they were going to promote me to a bigger division in a better part of the country. And I kind of realized, if I take this, I'm going to be making more money and I'm going to get trapped here. And I don't think I want to be trapped here for the next 20 or 30 or 40 years. And I left. I just very abruptly decided this was not where I wanted to be. And I've done that a few times in my life. And even in my poker days, there was a point where, I don't know, I just looked around me and I thought, I don't think this is what I want to do, and I want to be a contributing member of society. So there I moved at least toward being a contributing member of society.
And we'll put that link in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to Randy's kind of like all about Randy episode. And just for the listeners to know, like, this was not me coming to you and saying, hey, let's do an episode. Like, tell the listeners how we got here so they don't think like I was prying.
Well, in that episode, about the fourth time I brought up something, I thought, maybe I have an issue here.
Yeah.
I thought, I spent a lot of time figuring out what I don't want to do, and not running away in a sense that I was scared, but, well, kind of. I was scared to get trapped, right?
And
so moving to the next thing.
Moving away from something versus moving towards something.
Right.
I think some of the language we were using last time.
I am, in my mind, I want to think that I'm moving toward the future that I want, right? And so I think both have their place, but I think it should be explored. I don't know. We rip the Band-Aid off. We'll see. This could be. I also had a time in my life where I had serious commitment issues. Now,
let's not get there yet, because I think we're going to end up there today.
So yeah, but there, it does lead me back to that as well. To think that are those two things tied together.
So Randy came to me after the last episode, and not immediately after. It was probably 4 or 5 days afterwards, and you'd been reflecting on it as you often do. You're very thoughtful, very self-aware, and then we started talking about this, and then you suggested this could be an episode. This wasn't me saying, hey, let's get on the podcast. Let's expose Randy. But I think you were willing to kind of go through the process. Do you want to tell the listener a little bit about our background professionally and personally so that people know how we got to a place where we can have this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, there's obviously got to be a level of trust here, right?
Sure.
I mean, John and I met at BNI
networking group
10 years ago, give or take.
I think it might have been 16 or 18 years ago, but it was a long time. 2006, 7, 8.
I don't know if it's quite that, but anyway, in there. So
we're old.
But we met at BNI. We found out that we had a shared background at Vector, which we did not know. We were in different parts of the country and we didn't completely overlap there as much either, but in different parts of the country. Got together to network, have coffee, etc. And from there, John started coaching me in my business, and we've just, that's been a valuable relationship, and we've become good friends, and which has led us here today.
And years ago, I put together a group of CEOs who get together once a month, and we talk about everything, business, life, and we've been together for, 10, 12 years, whatever it's been, and so really, really close relationships, personally and professionally, for that group. And so we kind of have like a no holds barred, anything is on the table kind of conversation. And really in that group, it goes all directions, right? So it's true that I've been, advising, coaching Randy for years now, but, certainly Randy has had no shortage of feedback from me over the years to help me improve. Much, I mean, in a very much appreciated way. I don't not a backhanded compliment. Just it goes both ways. But today you said, hey, let's dive into this and let's figure out what this is all about. And so this will be a little bit like a coaching call, not like a coaching call in that we're recording it for the world to listen to.
Well, like I said, let's rip the Band-Aid off and see what's there.
All right. Well, so let's get into it. So it started early when you said, I knew that I didn't want to be a farmer. How did you know? And when did you know?
God, I think I knew when I was a kid. I mean, I've never really thought about this, right? But I watched what my dad did, and just wasn't that interesting to me.
Yeah.
Right? I think farming and, my dad raised cattle, but it's feeding the world, right? The American farmer has done a lot, but it just wasn't my path, right?
Yeah.
And also, on top of that, my dad worked hard. I mean, he worked from like before the sun came up till after the sun went down and did it 7 days a week. And cattle need feeding, and they get sick. They need, they need care,
yeah.
Right? And for very little money. I mean, I remember at one point, I forget if it was 3 or 4 years in a row, my dad worked long, long hours, 7 days a week, and lost money, and was going further in debt. Why in the world would I want to do that,
yeah.
Right?
And did you understand that even as a kid, that he was going to
debt? I watched. I mean, I was always observant. I watched. I saw. I remember a conversation. I was 10, 12 years old, I'm going to guess. And I remember my dad was considering buying these cattle. And one of the things I took from him that has been useful from business, he sat down with a pencil and a piece of paper,
yep.
And he wrote out, this is what the cattle are going to cost, this is what shipping's going to be, this is what's going to cost to feed them, for medicine, death is going to be this much, insurance is going to be this much, blah, 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 blah. Then he made the assumptions that at the end he was going to sell these, whether it was 6 months or a year later, that he was going to sell these, and that they would be at a certain weight,
yep.
And the price would be at a certain level.
Yep.
So a lot of variables here, right?
Yeah.
Death, price, weight, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of them that even then I realized he couldn't control. And I remember standing over his shoulder watching him do this. And I don't remember what the number was at the bottom, but I was always really good at math. And I looked at it, and the return on investment, it was frickin' minuscule, right? Like, it was, I swear you could put money in bonds and do better. Well, definitely back then with what interest rates were, right?
Yeah.
And I just told him, I said, I think you're in the wrong business. I think you should find something else to do. And I remember him looking at me and going, kind of, smiling and going, well, you're right. But it's like, I'm too dumb to do anything else. Right. And he was not dumb, but that was he's like, this is all I know how to do. And he liked being his own boss and being free, sure. And nobody telling him what to do. But so it was that, but it was more just the lifestyle and the work. Right. Yeah. And there's great parts of the lifestyle, but the day-to-day monotonous work is, especially, haying and crops and just sitting on a tractor going around in a circle or back and forth I am not built for that.
Yeah. So for all of our listeners who are out there farming right now, Randy's not saying it's not good to be a farmer, just saying it's not for him.
No, I think it's amazing, right? I really do. I mean, these are people that have fed this country and fed the world, right? And they've worked their asses off, but it just wasn't the path for me.
I think it's important too, is like, we've talked a lot over the years about people are built for something, and we have exercises we've gone through many times where we talk about, how you find your calling and then that purpose, right? That purpose that, and there's lots of, philosophies about this, and, Greek philosophy and Japanese, philosophy about this. And we've done that work, but you've had that experience of like knowing something wasn't for you throughout your life. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just as a kid.
Yeah. I mean, even when I got to college, right? I didn't know what I wanted to be. I picked engineering because that's what my counselor told me I'd be good at. Sure. And I was a mechanical engineering major. I remember she asked me what I liked, and I liked computers.
Yeah.
And she told me there was no money in computers.
Yeah, smart.
Yeah. She didn't know better, right? She was a high school counselor in a small town in Minnesota, and there wasn't any money in computers at that time. She wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
She just couldn't see the future.
Yeah.
And so I went into engineering. Well, I also pretty quickly realized...
And to be fair, there still is engineering opportunity today.
Yeah, right. And back then it paid a lot more money than computers paid, right?
Yeah.
But I remember taking a class, and I just went, I just put my head down, and I went through all the math and the chemistry and the physics and everything. I liked physics. And I had an engineering class where once a week they had an engineer come in and just tell you what they did, or specifically mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
Same thing. I figured out, I don't want to do that. Over 10 weeks, 10 people came and talked about it. And at the end, I thought, there isn't any of those people's job that I want to do.
Yep.
So again, it was me saying, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah. Okay.
And Vector, Vector was very exciting when I first started. I was young. I was a manager at 19, looked like I was 12. And I was learning and I was growing, and that part of it was exciting. I was making real money, more money than I was going to make as an engineer. And I wore fancy suits and this and that. And I bought a 7 Series BMW when I was 22, 3 years old. It was slightly used, but, that was a fancy car, especially I was in Cedar Rapids, Iowa at the time.
Yeah.
So while I was growing, there was, and I was getting better and new challenges. That was exciting. And then once it just became real monotonous, and that was just doing over and over and over again, I realized it wasn't where I wanted to be long term. It was just not the same conversations and it wasn't challenging enough.
Yeah, we've talked before about like some people are great at building the train tracks and some people are great at conducting the trains. And I think one of the things you and I share is we're both railroad builders, not conductors, and it's taking nothing away one from the other. There's just some people are wired for different types of work, and so and again, that's no judgment around that, right? Just I think know thyself and put yourself in a situation. And by the way, in my career at least, I haven't always been able to put myself in a situation where it was a perfect fit for me. I think early career, a lot of people have to find themselves and kind of work through different things. Not unusual, but again, Vector wasn't the last time that happened.
No, but it was career-wise, that was the big one. I mean, poker had happened. Poker was more about having an impact, right? Or just being able to, in a lot of ways, that was pretty great, right? I mean, at the beginning, I was spending all my time in Vegas and LA and Atlantic City, and I was traveling and coming back and forth to Austin. I could play online if I wanted. There was a lot of freedom. But at the end, I figured out, I can go to Colombia and do this, and I can go to Costa Rica, and I can go to the Dominican Republic, and I started traveling the world. And I had ultimate freedom. And, I kind of joke, it was my backpacking Europe phase, except I made good money doing it, right? So that was, but there it was the lifestyle. And while I met a lot of really nice, great people, some of which are friends to this day, I was also surrounded by more people that I maybe didn't want to be in my 5. Were the people I spent the most time with. And
now you and I know what that means, but maybe for listeners that haven't heard my 5, tell us more about that.
Well, I don't know who made this famous, but you are the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? Yeah. And if you want to be healthy, if you spend time with 5 people that are super healthy and eat clean and exercise, there's a good chance you're going to become them.
Right.
If you want to be successful, if you hang around 5 successful people, you are going to become that. If you hang around 5 people that are criminals, you are going to become that. And, the sad fact of poker, while there's all these great people and you meet, CEOs and doctors and business people and just professionals of all different types, you also meet drug dealers, pimps, etc. I mean, I didn't really know people that were on probation or people that had to get locked up. And it was just...
Well, for people that don't know you, I think it's worth mentioning, like, you're one of the least judgmental people I've ever met. Like, I think your group of friends is diverse, a group of friends across, backgrounds and races and job descriptions and like every variable I can think of, but that describes a human being. You have some of the most diverse relationships of anybody that I know.
Yeah. And by the way, the people that I wanted to get away from to some extent, I liked a lot of them. Yeah. Like some of those people were funny and fun and like they weren't know.
So what I'm hearing you say, you don't mean get away from like, I don't ever want to talk to you. Just I want to understand who my closest inner circle is and make sure that really aligns with who I want to become. And the other people I'm happy to be friends with, but I want to make sure that I'm not becoming someone in a reactive way. I want to be thoughtful about who I'm becoming.
Yeah, and that was...
Because I think it can sound bad, right?
That might have been one of the times where I was running toward contributing to the world as much as I was running away from falling into that trap, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that I was scared that all of a sudden I was going to start dealing drugs or that was going to become my thing. But, you know, I mean, the truth is, because of that experience, me and another guy we put pretty significant time into starting what would have been a low level and not like a full-fledged bookie thing, but we flew to Costa Rica. We met with people that, we met with the Italian mob. I mean, they didn't present themselves as much, but, you know, I knew I did not want to be a part of that, right? Like, we went down there looking for partners and ended up at this house in the middle of, I mean, we'd jump in a cab, get dropped off at this house in this nice neighborhood in San Jose, Costa Rica. The fence around the outside with the barbed wire, which is not that uncommon there. Walk into this great big house that they're running a, you know, offshore bookmaking business. And we're upstairs sitting, and at some point through the conversation with this young kid, I'm like, oh, he's been kicked out of L.A. He can't go back to the U.S. He's here fleeing. And we would be partners with the Italian, with the mafia, in a country where for $20 the police will probably help you hide the body. I'm thinking, yeah, this is not what we want to do, right? Like that's just, I don't think that was running away from something as well as not putting myself in that position. I'm going to put that under the banner of
experiences I've never had.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But that would not have, you know, I don't think I would have found myself in that position if it wasn't for poker and that community and just, you know, that it's just a different attitude and a different life.
Okay, and so take me through. So I don't want to rehash the episode we've already done about Randy Lorensen, and I do want to get into poker in a different episode. But I think that's just a fascinating topic around. I think it sounds like so much fun in so many ways, and so many life lessons that can come from that about risk and reward. So we can get into that in a different episode. But so tell me more when you kind of reflected on that conversation and came back and said, "This is something I want to dive into." Like, take me through your thinking. Like, what was it that triggered you to think about it after? I don't mean emotionally triggered. I just mean what prompted you to think about it after the episode? What was the thought process you took through it? What made you want to call and say, "Hey, John, there's something here"? Like, take me through that for a minute.
I guess part of it is my belief, thoughts. I think it's better to run toward what you want, right? And embrace what you want and create the future that you want. And I don't believe that you probably do that best by moving away. I mean, by process of elimination, if you move away from everything you don't like, or places you don't want to be, lifestyle you don't want to have, that works, right? And a lot of people deal with pain, you know, by moving away from pain better than they do moving toward what they want. Sure. I'm not really that way as much. I do much better moving toward what I want than moving away from pain is not as motivating to me.
And it's okay for me to share some of our other conversations as we come forward here, because I think there's some things I know about you that maybe you've told me, maybe you haven't. But I think one of the things we've talked about is, like, when we talk about business planning or thinking about new ideas in the professional space, you really like certainty, and you like certainty from a high level. And you want to break it all the way down to the granular. And so you like to have that view of things, right? Which is...
I don't know if it's certainty, because I don't know...
Certainty is a bad word.
Yeah, because
but you want to build it up from 100,000 feet down to the bottom to understand how it works.
Yes, I inevitably start from the 30,000 foot view or the 100,000 foot view and then work backwards. Most people I have learned don't and can't do that. I start with the end in mind and where I want to be in 10 years or 30 years.
Yeah.
And then I figure out how to get there.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't call it certainty, though, because I also, part of this is the poker player in me. I think in percentages a lot.
Yeah, it's fair.
right?
But sometimes you want to understand like all the different paths to get somewhere. And I've given you guidance and counsel at times, like, hey, some of that work may be wasted, some of that work may be healthy, but as long as you recognize what work is helpful to you and what work is not helpful to you, so that you don't toss good time after bad, or good money after bad.
But if I have a plan that's 10 years in the 30,000-foot view, I go back to my dad sitting at that kitchen table with a paper and a pencil, and I'm doing the same thing, only I use a spreadsheet.
Sure.
And it's a far more complex, and I make this assumption and that assumption. I have done that same exercise for almost anything I've ever done. I've modeled it out and made assumptions, and I go through, and I usually do the one that there's like best case scenario, what I think will happen, and then worst case scenario, right? Like 3 different assumptions. But yeah, that is my thought process. I start at the end and then figure out how to get there. And I think most people start with, at the beginning, what's step 1?
But for the listener, I would say that, that's not like a prescription for business planning. That's Randy knows his brain really, really well, right? And you just know the way that you process information so that you can think through it. And that's the way that you see it as being helpful. And it's really effective for you too, right? It really helps you to understand what questions you want to ask and where you want to head. And there's been some times it's helped you understand what path you do or don't want to be on.
Yeah.
There's also been some times you've made some plans around that where it just hasn't gone at all like expected, and you had to like toss the plan out.
Yeah, I mean, I on one hand, I definitely have an ability to connect dots that I don't know. I just assume, a lot of us, we assume everybody thinks the way we do. And I found out through time, I'm connecting dots that I just assumed everybody else could connect. And you've been instrumental in helping me realize that. You're like, they don't see that, other people. And I found out it's almost nobody now that I'm aware of it. The downside to that, one, is sometimes communication. I'm having a conversation where they're not on the same page. But on the other hand, sometimes I don't get granular enough with some of the steps and some of the things along the way. I will make assumptions that, we're going to do boom, boom, boom to get to this level.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because you've had success in a place in the past, you might assume you're going to have success in the future, whatever the case may be. But I think, and here's where I would push a little bit. I'd say, sometimes moving away from or knowing what you don't want can be as helpful as knowing what you do want. Like I was talking to someone earlier in the week, and they were getting stuck about what they wanted, and I said, well, just tell me on this list of things, what don't you want? Let's just start there, because if you can eliminate some of the choices and just narrow down some of the choices, that can make decision making easier. There was a study done years ago. It was heuristic. It was a marketing study, not a scientific study. But they went out and offered a $5 gift card or a $5 bill to people. This was back when $5 was worth a lot, so you can tell how old this was. And people liked the $5 gift card more than the $5 bill because they didn't have to make as many decisions about how to spend it, which was totally counterintuitive to me, because a $5 bill, by definition, has more utility than a $5 gift card, right? But it made the cognitive overhead so much lower for people, is my assumption. I don't know if that's the case factually, but what I took away from that was that sometimes reducing cognitive overhead can be really helpful. And so moving away from choices and saying, hey, I'm not going to choose 100 things. I know those 50 don't matter, and just continuing to wipe off as many. And that's one of the ways that we help people find core values, which we'll talk about in a different episode, but it's one way to do things. Yeah.
And look, everything I've done has gotten me to where I am, right? And so if I could go back and change it, would I? I don't know. Probably not, right? I mean, because it has gotten me where I am, and I have a good life, and I enjoy it. But
so maybe it's okay to move away from some things and move towards some things, as long as there's some maybe deliberate moving toward along the way.
Yeah, and I've definitely moved toward things in a way, but it does make me wonder. For example, when I left Vector, I could have went, probably Phoenix is where I would have ended up. Like, I could have went to Phoenix, made some money for a couple of years, and then left. Right? Like, but somehow in my brain, there was something there that was like, no, I wouldn't have actually been trapped.
What are you moving toward now? I mean, maybe the reason this pinged on you is because you're moving away from something now and not toward now, and that's not satisfying you in some ways. Have you considered that? Like maybe this isn't about then. Maybe it's about now.
Maybe, and I've thought about that. So we have talked about, I have been working on my one sentence, right? Which came from, the book you and Anthony turned me on to, Yuri, Possible, I think is the book, but there's an episode on Tim Ferriss where Tim Ferriss, what's his name, Yuri something or another?
You're talking about the guy
the negotiator that has negotiated everything.
Camp David Accords. He's really famous.
I apologize
I'm going to look at his name right now.
I apologize to Yuri that I can't think of his name. Yeah. I'm literally in the middle of reading his book, and I don't know.
He wrote Getting to Yes, I think, was also.
Possible is the one I'm reading right now.
Yeah. It's William Ury.
William Ury. There we go. All right. I apologize to William. But he talks about in that book, and it was funny. I was already it's weird how things come into your life at the right time.
Yeah.
I was already thinking about like my personal mission, getting it down, and I'd been working and I'd been journaling, and it started out fairly long. And I started reading this book, and this book, unbeknownst to me, somebody gave it to me, and I started reading it, and the whole thing is about him getting down to his life's work and putting it into one sentence. Well, I started out with a whole paragraph, cut it down, and pretty soon I had it to helping bring abundance through the world, and that Bitcoin was the best way to do that because it's free. It creates freedom, and eventually it will solve all these other problems. Blah blah blah. But I realized it was more eloquent than that. But I realized I could simplify it.
Yep.
And pretty soon, I changed it to getting bureaucracy and roadblocks out of the way, and that Bitcoin was no longer in it, but Bitcoin, I was like kind of a note to myself, is currently the best way to do that on a long-term scale, right? And at some point, I just have been kind of working on this and journaling and writing about it. And at some point, I got it down to just spread abundance, which was, I love where it's at. I've got it. I've taken that. I've put it on the wall next to my vision board. I remind myself, just spread abundance. This podcast, right?
Yeah.
Tales of Abundance is about spreading abundance in the world.
Sure.
The book I'm writing is about helping spread. And so my company, when I can create opportunity for dealers to start their own business and grow.
That'd be cabinet dealers. Just want to make sure we're clear about that based on our earlier conversation today.
So, fair enough. Fair enough.
So I wasn't sure if we mentioned that or not, but Randy runs Premium Cabinets, which is a national cabinet company that has dealers in different cities and states, and they are actually high quality cabinets. That's not code for something else.
Yes. So all of that very well aligns with spreading abundance, right? And helping people get that in whatever form, right? So there probably is something there, but I never had that. If you would have asked me when I was younger, it would have been more about freedom. And even when I first met you, I was thinking more about sovereignty, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I had, tweaked freedom to sovereignty. And so in a way, I've been working on this for 30 years, a long time that I started working on it. And it was helping give people freedom and then sovereignty. And now it's less about, I still think those are really important, right? I think that bringing freedom and sovereignty to the world is great, but that might not be what other people want. Now I think I'm much more accepting to just whatever they want is the next thing. And if I can somehow assist them in bringing, maybe it is freedom and sovereignty to their life or to the world, then that's great. I love that, right? But if it's just starting whatever business or taking care of their family or getting to travel or however it is that they want to bring abundance to the world is a win for everybody. And anything I can do to help in that journey is a win for me, is, potentially a win for the world.
So have you tried this one on, and you just tell me if the shoe fits, right? But when you talk about moving away from something today in your life, you can describe that in very concrete terms, like something very specific I'm moving away from. When you're talking about moving towards something in your life, it's a much more amorphous, ambiguous, and I don't hear the same level of clarity from you about moving toward as I hear when I hear you talk about moving away from.
Well, I don't know. I mean, spreading abundance is really specific. It's 2 words, right? And it's just, now, by the way, the best way to do that, I believe right now, this is getting into a whole different, can of worms. I believe the biggest thing standing in the way of abundance in the world right now is bureaucracy, government, people killing jobs, people making it hard to start a business, making it hard to raise a family, just hard to fill out your tax code.
Here's where I want to dive in.
Okay.
So
I think that is, I think it's criminal.
Okay, so let's. I'm gonna kind of interrupt for a second,
Yeah,
because this is where I'm gonna try and do a little coaching and see if I can help you move this forward for you. And this is, I think, why we're here on this episode today, right? When you've talked about moving away from past tense and current tense, you talk about things that are squarely inside your area of control. And this is what I want you to consider and then maybe reflect on. When you talk about abundance and the problems that are impacting abundance, you generally talk about things that are far outside of your control, where you could influence, but you can't directly control. And that causes great frustration with you and has for years. Like, this is a conversation that's been ongoing for a long time. What would it be like if the moving toward abundance conversation was balanced with the moving away from conversation? And all the other things are true. Like, none of that's untrue. But what if you brought it back to, what are you moving toward for you, for your 5, for the group of people outside the 5, and then instead of from the outside in, looked at it from the inside out in the same way you look at the inside out moving away from? What if you forced yourself through the same lens? What would become new information to you in thinking about it that way? Like, what would that perspective offer to you as a perspective?
I'm taking a minute to reflect on this because I don't want to just... I think I've done that. And I think that's where I was building to.
We've never had that part of the conversation before, if you have.
I believe strongly that Bitcoin is that solution. Okay. I don't think we're going to vote our way out of bad government, bad bureaucracy.
We've definitely talked about Bitcoin as a part of this, yeah.
And this is a long, slow, I don't know a better solution right now. So for me, whether it's building a cabinet company and finding new dealers who want to create a better opportunity for them and their family, again, that's abundance, right? That's something I can do. I can find new dealers. I can train. I can develop. I can support those people.
And worth saying for the listener,
right?
Like, I look at a lot of business models every day, all day, and what you've got is it's a different opportunity. It really is something unique and different. And I don't want to, this isn't a sales pitch for that, but it is definitely a different thing. So, which is cool.
So specifically, and by the way, working on my 1 sentence, or what turned out to be 2 words, spread abundance, aligns very well with that, right? Like, it helps me to remember why I'm doing it. And I always had that. It was there, but I just have more clarity with it, right? I don't know that in 10 years Bitcoin will be the answer, because with technology, things could change. Right now, I don't believe that, we want to keep these evergreen because we don't know when people are going to listen, but we're pretty close to Election Day. I don't know that I believe whoever we vote for is going to change. It just seems to me we're going the same way.
Can I press here, though, for a minute?
Yeah.
And I want to press into this a little further. I've heard you talk about Bitcoin as the answer, and I believe you believe that. And you've educated me a lot on how some of this stuff works. I'd say I'm a believer, not in the way that you are, but certainly I've watched how you've been right about a lot of these things. But I think that maybe misses part of what I'm trying to ask you to look into. And that is that if you say, I want to move away from a job, or I want to move away from a lifestyle, that's something very, very specific. I want to move toward Bitcoin. That's not.
Well, look, I host a meetup every Tuesday morning.
Yep.
I am not really a morning person.
Yeah.
It forces me to get up early.
Yeah.
I drive an hour, spend my time that I really, for personal gain, is not a good use of my time in any way, shape, or form.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Like, I would be much better working, and I have decided that this is a really important part of my week.
Yeah.
And almost every week somebody comes in that's new, and I help them on their journey. And sometimes I help them on their journey by just saying, oh, you should talk to Mike, or you should talk to this person, because I ask them questions, find out why they're there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's me helping them. A lot of times it's, hey, go read the Bitcoin Standard, or go listen to the first 9 episodes of Michael Saylor on the What Is Money show, right?
Sure.
And whatever that is for that person. But that is me working on helping that person get what they need. So,
by the way, that's a really important part of community too. I think that's a really important part of how we. I just think that's if everyone had a way to give back without what they're getting from it, I think we'd have a better world. So I just want to offer that as a thank you.
It is. It's a, and I do. I wonder. I think, God, I got to get up. I got to fight traffic. I got to, I drive an hour both ways. It's 30 minutes home, an hour there. But, it does. It takes a chunk of time every Tuesday morning.
Sure.
But I also enjoy the community. I like the people.
Sure.
We go in there, we drink coffee, we talk, we laugh, we, whatever. We try and solve the world's problems and whatever else. But it's a way of giving back, and I can control that, right? Like that is, I think I've gotten better at this in the last few years. I can control what happens to some extent within my company. I can control what happens in my family, and I can control what happens there one by one with people. This podcast is a version of running towards something.
Yeah.
The book I wrote, the next book, I'll probably lose enough money on the first book that it's making me want to write a second book, right?
It's like golf.
But I already know what that is. I don't know. It's funny. 2 years ago, I had zero desire to be a writer. And now I realize there's something there. I've got 2 other books planned. They're going to be much shorter and simpler than the first one.
Book is like 900 pages, listeners. worth the read.
I'm trying to cut it down.
Yeah.
Trying to make it shorter. So the next 2 are actually, I think, going to be like 100 pages or less.
Yeah.
They're going to be simple. But so I think I'm there, but I don't know. I mean, I still need work on it. Like I still realize sometimes I get drugged down into. You're not wrong that when you said I am really frustrated by some of the things I can't control, you're right. And sometimes I get drugged down into that, but
don't we all? I mean, isn't that that's a thing?
Yeah. But I also think it's one of those things that I've decided I have to allow myself to do that because I have to understand it well enough to solve it. Like I sort of have to go dance with the problem in order to otherwise you can't really offer a solution, and I can't really take personal action, right? Yeah. So as we talk about this, I think maybe more than I realized, I've somewhat solved this problem. Not completely. I'm still working on it. But
let's go back
better than I was.
Let's go back. Yeah, I don't disagree with that, by the way. I think that might be where we land at the end of the conversation, too. But let's talk about the commitment issues you brought up earlier. Like, walk me through how that whole thing played out. I know the story, but I think it'd be fun for the listeners to hear. And I think it might be a good analog for growth and getting from here to there.
So it's before I moved to Austin. I moved to Austin 25 years ago. So before that, I was dating. And I was in a phase where I was dating a lot. And I'm at dinner with a girl. And she asks me a question nobody had ever asked me. What's the longest relationship you've ever had? And I thought, I just looked at her and I said, never thought about it. Thought for a second. I thought, well, one girl, I thought, well, that was 3 months. And I thought about the next girl. I'm like, that was 3 months. That was 3 months. That was 3 months. And I went through 8 different relationships that were all 3 months. And I thought to myself, well, wait, one of them had to go 4. And I'm like, nope, 3.5? I don't think so. Like, I mean, it was right at 3 months. And I was thinking, God, they weren't 2. They weren't 2.5. Like I didn't have a calendar out, but in my mind, they were all like almost exactly 3 months. I wish I could know how close it was. There's no way of really knowing that, right? And I just sat back and I looked at her and I said, well,
2,160 hours.
You are not.
Sorry.
I looked at her across the table and I said, and in my mind, I know this relationship's dead. This will be a one-date deal, right? And I just looked at her and I said, you're not going to like this answer. And she's like, why? And I go, 3 months, 8 different times, not 4 months, not 2 months. And I looked at her and I said, I might have commitment issues. And thanks to you, I just figured that out. I literally had no idea to that.
Did you say that to her?
Yeah.
What'd she say back? Check, please.
I don't remember her response. It was more of a self-realization, and yeah, that was the only date. I don't know that was going anywhere anyway, but it was a a big realization, right? And I had to do some soul searching.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of figuring out how to fix that.
And I mean, to say you fixed it, you've got a wonderful wife, Julie, now, who you guys have been together
11 years tomorrow. Yeah. 12 years tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. Significantly more than 2,100 hours.
Yes. No.
That's great.
God, now I'm not sure if it's 11 or 12, but I think it's 12 years tomorrow. She forgets more than I do, so I'm okay here.
Can we commit to doing the math before this episode comes out, so you can actually clarify that before it comes out? Not on the air, but more for her.
We'll leave it where it is. I'll ask her. She won't know either. She screws it up more than I do.
Oh, that's funny. Now it's so long you can't remember, which is much longer than 3 months. Yeah. So I mean, obviously you went from commitment issues to great relationship now. I mean, is it possible that running away from things, because running away from things can serve you too, right? Like, if you find a dragon, probably not the best thing to do to run toward it always, I think there are people that have to do that for their jobs sometimes. And we've got a lot of respect for people that run into the fire, and they do that for the benefit of others, serving others. I can think of first responders and military in particular that do a lot of that. But I think that, fear and moving away from can serve us well also. Like, I had a CEO, I think I've mentioned this, maybe even on the show before, that I had a CEO that said, hey, can you train my team how to be fearless? And my answer is, I have no interest in doing that. I'll teach them how to be courageous in the face of fear, but getting rid of fear is how you run off a cliff, right?
Right.
And so is it possible that maybe that wasn't serving you well before, but it is serving you well now?
Maybe. Another thought I just had while you're saying that is I think one of my strengths is I do run into doing hard things, whether, at the gym when other people don't want to quit, I want to do more and I just want to keep going. If I go sit in the sauna, like, I don't want to sit, I want the sauna at least 180 or 190 degrees, 220 would be better. And I'm going to sit in there. If I'm sick and dying, I'm just not getting out in less than 20 minutes, right? And sometimes I'll sit in there for 50 minutes or an hour. This
is not a prescription for what you should do at home, by the way. This is Randy describing himself.
But as you know, I did cryo almost every day for a long time. Ice baths, things that, like, ice baths are miserable.
Yeah, cryo's where you go into like a little area, like a machine almost, and you stand in it, and it's like negative.
I don't know. I'd have the guy turn it up as high as he could. I think it was like negative 280 or 286 or something like that.
And you stay in for like a minute or two.
3 minutes.
3 minutes with gloves and socks on.
Yeah, I stopped wearing some of that stuff, but yeah. Probably not recommended either.
Yes.
But
this is not.
Do not try this at home, kids.
This episode is about how Randy does things, not about how you should.
Yeah, so I like, I've done fasts. I started with a 24-hour fast and then did several 3-day fasts, and I did a 5-day fast, and I did a 7-day. Like, there's a part of me that very much enjoys doing hard things, right? So I'm wondering, has that helped build that muscle? Has that made me better equipped? I don't know. Maybe that's I don't know. What do you think? Is that a contributing factor? Does that help?
I don't know. I think the thing I was trying to get to is just understand, like, this whole episode started with moving away from, and then moving toward, and the way that it was framed in our first conversation off the air was, like, I want to dig into that. And the insinuation was it's a problem. And so I think that, like many tools, there are tools can be used and create a problem when they're used inappropriately, but then there are tools that used well are really good tools to have. And I think moving away from things, like moving away from the side of a cliff, is something I still do, and I'm cool with that, But I live in a condo in a tower, and I'm scared of heights. And so for the first 6 months, like, getting closer than 6 inches to the window was like freaky for me.
I did not know you. So you're on the 35th floor.
Yeah.
And you chose a 35th floor, and you're scared of heights.
Yeah,
I didn't know that till just now.
Yeah. But again,
you're really scared of falling, to be clear.
That's probably true. Yeah, and that's one of the two fears we're born with, right? So, like, there's a real biological reason we have that fear, and I think it's smart to be afraid of that. I was just in the news recently. There's been several people that have kind of gotten too close to the edge and fallen over, happens pretty regularly. And it's, I think,
Gotten too close to the edge of what?
Like cliffs, like you see hikers go over
Yeah.
a cliff and die, and unintentionally, right? And so I think having a healthy fear of heights is reasonable, but I think there's also, so moving away from the edge is okay. And then I think there's also fear that's, some fear is not healthy. And so I think having an awareness about where it serves you and where it doesn't serve you. And the way that I talk about it with people is like, it's okay to be afraid of things, but I don't want fear driving the car. I want fear being an informant buckled into the back seat and giving me information. And then I can choose how I use that information. There are times that I react to fear too. I don't want to make it seem like I'm like this, perfect. But I think that when fear is an informant versus a driver, I find that to be more helpful in my life. And so the question I was trying to get us to is this running away from thing gone from an unhealthy running away to a healthy informant? Or maybe it's always been healthy for you. I don't know the answer. Only you could answer that. But I think, today, is the lens like this is a problem, or is this lens like, hey, maybe this is a tool that I'm using well?
At the beginning of this, I really was a little worried. I was like, God, what are we going to rip off? What Band-Aid is this going to rip off? What shit's going to come up that I'm going to have to deal with, right? And to some extent for the listeners, I think I wish that would have been there, right? But for me, it's a little bit relieving.
And I'm no stranger to kind of making you dig in and dive deep and do painful work.
We've had some conversations that have been like, oh, shit, now I got to deal with this, or I got to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
And that's not what this has almost been. I think a rare time where I think maybe, it was a problem, I think, when I was younger. And I think,
maybe,
I haven't fully figured it out. Well, I think it was a problem because I think if I would have run toward what I wanted to do, I would have gotten to success, happiness. I would have got to a better place faster.
Okay,
right?
Fair.
And you know me well enough to know that I'm just not going to keep doing something for money or that. Like if it's making me miserable or it's not where I want to be. It's so running towards something I think would have always been healthier. I think I just didn't know how to do that. And I do think
sometimes it's easier to figure out what you don't want than to figure out what you do want. And sometimes people just, and this is where mentors can play such a great role, is they can help people think through the what to run toward. I've also seen this happen though, where sometimes mentors, they're a hammer, so everything they see is a nail, and they only know their way of doing it. And so I think great mentorship is someone who's had enough experience to recognize, like, they've done it a way, but there are lots of other ways too. And that's, I think, the difference between a good mentor and a great mentor can be someone who accepts that there's more than one path to get there. And there are certainly times in my life where I thought my path was the only path. And, somebody called me out on that, and they're like, that's a pretty arrogant, way of thinking. And as I reflect on that, I was like, that's way beyond arrogant. Like, that's just plain destructive, but I had to have someone kind of shine that mirror at me and recognize, like, I don't have a monopoly on the right way to do things, which is interesting, right? Because I often offer frameworks to people, and those frameworks are really well informed by lots and lots of research about lots of ways of doing things. But the reality is it's a way, not the way, right?
And I think also some of the tools you've helped me with, right? Like, it's not like I hadn't heard of core values, but
sure.
with your help, I really set core values, right, for my company. Had made me think about it personally, right? A vision board. I'd always set goals, but having a vision board. I mean, I think some of those, ironically, those are episodes we already have planned in the future. Right. So great things for the listeners. But I think maybe I didn't know how to run toward things in a weird way.
Well, I think that's a lot of it, right? I think that's, we're a product of our environment, and we don't always have all the tools that we wish we'd had. And so I think that, I don't know. For me, I was lucky to have a mentor early on in my career who introduced me to the concept of life planning. And the first time I was introduced to the concept of life planning, I was 19 years old. And now with my kids, I write my kids a letter on their 18th birthday and talk about the most important decisions they'll make in their life. There's 3 of them. And then I talk about decision making as a concept and how to think about decision making. But I really want them to learn how to make a decision more than I want them to learn to make the decisions that I've made. I think that's really important.
No.
But moving away from bad decisions is one of those things. And I just don't think that moving away from in and of itself is unhealthy.
Yeah. I guess my thought is that if I was younger and I would have been running toward, like, if I would have just and again, hindsight's 20/20, right? I'm not,
Sure.
Like I said, I don't know that I'd change anything. But if I would have went back to I was 20 years old, if I could go back to tell my 20-year-old self, you always hear if you could go back and tell yourself at 18, what would you tell yourself, right? And most people are like, buy Apple or buy Amazon or something, something like this, right? If I could go back and tell myself, maybe the answer is spread abundance. And if I was on that path from that point forward, I don't know.
I think you're being tough on yourself. We talk about those 4 seasons, but the 4 seasons of your career arc, I think that people have to go through that career arc. And sometimes I think we romanticize the idea of helping people on a shortcut because we wish it hadn't been so hard. But, the reality, I was thinking about this on the way in today. Like, I have always not enjoyed going to the gym and working out. I've enjoyed the sport of it. Like, I've enjoyed the competitive nature. So if it was running versus soccer, I wanted to play soccer. If it was swimming versus water polo, I wanted to play water polo. If it was, kata versus sparring in karate, I wanted to spar. Like that, like because I enjoy that interactive nature, and so much the better if it was a team, right?
Right.
But for the first time in my life, I enjoy going to the gym. Right now. And the reason I enjoy going to the gym is a number of new things for me. There was some camaraderie with the trainer that I have. I'm getting to see some results that I really want to see, but it's a new way of looking at something. And so I guess, so today I would say, forget what you would go tell your 20-year-old self. What would you tell yourself today? Like if you were really being thoughtful about what we've talked about today and running away versus running toward, like most of us don't take a minute and see, and you do a good job of this. Like, what's the lesson right here, right now? And so maybe while we're the listeners listening in, you just pull the curtain back on that for a minute and say, okay, Randy, let's take a minute. Like, even if it's just quiet minute, like, what's the lesson? What's the lesson around running toward versus running away? And with those tools side by side in your kit, and if you could, step into the future for 10 years, look backwards and tell yourself today something, what would that be?
10 years in the future, I'd want to just...
Like, what would you know about running toward and running away 10 years from now that you could look back at today and say, okay, what do you want me to know about how to use those two tools together in a way that's healthy, productive, and in a way that you're getting what you want from them?
Well, by the way, I think this is different for different people. I think a lot of people are more motivated by running away or moving away from pain, right?
Sure.
I think that's a fact. So some people, it might be really the way to go. I'm just personally more motivated by running toward. So if we're coming back to spreading abundance in the world, and I'm looking back, I think it's that. I think I'm telling myself, just make sure everything aligns with that, and make sure you ask God and ask the world, and how do you do this, and how do you best do that in every situation, every interaction? Not that that's possible to be that perfect, but
are you doing that today?
Better and better.
And so what have you done? Because we actually have worked on this in the last week, unbeknownst to you, but what have we done in the last week to make that more real for you?
Well, we're accountability, which I've just, on my company, I had a bad quarter last month hitting rocks, and there's a lot of stuff going on that we don't have to dig into here that outside of myself, not has very little to do with me personally, but
so just for the listener, rocks are like goals, right? And so we set goals every 90 days, and Randy had some goals he didn't accomplish. And one of the things we came to was that Randy's personal accountability wasn't what he wanted it to be.
Yeah. And so I have been stepping back. This is something I did in the past.
And Randy, you're one of the most accountable people I know, by the way. So that's like, I just want to make sure we level set.
But we really dropped the ball. Me personally, which is my company, so it's me. We really dropped the ball for the 90 days of the last quarter. Yeah. And that can never happen again, right? So it's breaking it down into daily tasks and really getting granular. I'm probably not what I need to do for 5 years, but for the next 90 days, or maybe it's the next 6 months, a year, whatever, sure. I think this will serve me well, right? Is getting into those tasks.
It's an important part of behavior change, by the way. It takes anywhere from 90 days to a year to kind of reestablish or to establish a new behavior set, and some habits you let get off track a little bit. And that's okay. It happens to all of us. Like everyone on the planet has this happen to them, if they're aware that of their habits. And so do you want to be more specific even? Because we're doing some really specific things.
Just every day I text you and my business partner, and these are the 3 things I'm going to accomplish today. And then at the end of the day, I text that they're done or not done or whatever, right?
I don't think you've missed a day yet. You certainly have missed a day of texting, and I don't think you've missed a day of doing things either.
Today's going to be challenging because we're recording, but
yeah.
So today might be a late night, but that's good. And I generally have not needed that for the last several years. That is not something that I would have found beneficial, but somehow I just got off the path a little bit, got distracted or whatever else. So that's good. And some of this is, I have been really trying to focus on prayer, meditation. This is a whole nother can of worms, but on an ayahuasca journey, my big takeaway was that just ask God, ask the universe, what should I do today? And then do it, right? And even I'm not very good. In fact, I met with a mutual friend of ours a couple days ago to pick his brain on prayer and some of the other things to get better at this. And another friend of ours, has, got months now of 20 to 30 minutes in the morning of doing this, which I think is outstanding because I have a hard time getting my brain to slow down for 30 seconds to do it. Yeah. What I have been better at, though, is just stopping, even in the middle of the day, and saying, what should I be doing right now, right? What should I be doing to spread abundance? And the more frequently I ask myself that, the answers tend to just, I kind of know if I ask, right? Which is a big jump for me because historically I'm somebody that I'm like, well, I can figure it out. And it's not me asking, it's me powering through and figuring it out. And, one of the things I've learned from you, like, you are very good at when you take something, you're like, okay, what's best practices? What's the model? Let's start there. Where historically what I would do is I would start something and I would just start from scratch and figure it out from first principles. And I've learned that, if I just start with best practices and do that, probably that will be better than what I come up with. Or even if it's 90% there, it saves me a ton of time, right?
Learning from others is a skill all by itself.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's put a bow on it then. So what are your big takeaways from our conversation today? I will tell you, it was not what I expected coming in.
No, me either. This is completely different than what I expected this episode to be. I don't know, I feel good. I really thought we'd rip the Band-Aid off some. I thought something would come out, but
we did rip the Band-Aid off, and we found that the scar had healed, and you'd been using vitamin E for years.
So I think it's keep focusing on my 2 words, right? Spread abundance. Keep doing it. Keep working on it, and stay diligent, right? I think it's that, maybe it served me well for a time, but let me rephrase that. I don't think it did serve me that well, but it was the best that I knew how to do because I probably didn't know what to run toward. So figuring out what I didn't want to do was better. It was the best option that I had available to me at the time.
Yeah, it got you moving in a direction.
Yeah.
And you can use both those things in the future, right? Like they're both effective tools when employed at the right times, right? Like there are times it's good to run away from things. There was a fire in a building next door where I lived last night. Big flames out the ceiling fire,
Okay.
Like fire engines, all that, like, so, and that's a good thing to run away from unless you're a firefighter, right? And you're equipped to deal with it. And then it's a good thing to run toward if you're a firefighter on duty because that's what you're equipped for. And so I think there's a lot in that metaphor that can be good for us. Is, you can run into really tough situations if you're well equipped, well protected, well prepared. But the people, if you're not, if you can recognize and move away from that serves someone well too.
It's been good.
All right.
Yeah.
Listeners, we're going to leave a couple links to the podcast where Randy talked about this the first time. And then as we get podcasts put up on some of the topics we have today, core values and things like that, life planning, and, the 4 questions for figuring out what's, what you're designed for. If you believe in, being designed by a greater being, or if you just want to learn about, like, the Japanese ikigai that we talked about today, which was the finding purpose and meaning in your life, or some of the Greek, philosophy around that. We'll put all that stuff into the show notes for you, so you have some reading materials there. And then, as always, if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe, listen, refer, tell people to subscribe as well. And we'll look forward to having you back next time. Thanks, Randy, for opening up. This is, like I said, unexpected and fun.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Talk soon.